gas, also known as GHG, into the atmosphere. Mitigation is achieved either by reducing the sources of the gases, as such example, by increasing the share of renewable energy such as solar energy, or establishing a cleaner mobility system, or by enhancing the storage of these gases by increasing the size of forests. In short, mitigation is a human intervention that reduces the source of GHG emission or enhance the things. Okay, so we support that the state should prioritize the adoption of a mitigation in response to climate change, because adaptation have many benefits. Okay, because the adaptation solution take many shape and form depending on the unique context of a community, such as business, organization, country, region, and organization. Okay, there is no we say that there is no one size fits all solution. That adaptation can range from building flood defense, set up early warning system for cyclones, as fishing, to drought resistant crops, to redesigning communication system, business operation, and government policies. Many nations and communities are already taking steps to build resilient societies and economies. But considerably, greater action and ambition will be needed to cost effectively manage the risks both now and in the future. So there are many steps to adapt the climate change. First, the early warning system. So you know that early warning system are technologies that can accurately forecast when a storm, heat wave, or other adverse weather event is incoming. I will like to take a report that just 24 hours warning can be reduced to resulting damage by 30%, and investing at 100 million in such system in developing countries would prevent 360 billion per year in losses. The other ways that we can adapt the climate changes is through climate resilient infrastructure. I would like to take another report that it suggests that upgrading living condition in vulnerable communities, which might mean improving housing, water, sanitation, drainage, and waste management, will boost resilience and strengthen their adaptive capacity. More climate resilient infrastructure adds about 3% to upfront cost, would provide $4 in benefit for every $1 of cost. Okay. Then lastly, we can also improve our dryland agriculture. We can investing in drought resistant crops and modernizing irrigation system that could help protect small scale farms from rising temperatures. If that is done, again, the report says global crop yields could shrink by 30% by mid-century. So, lastly, I will repeat again that we support that adaptation should be prioritized by the states over the mitigation in response to climate changes. Thank you.
Thank you to the Prime Minister for the speech. The speaker spoke for 5 minutes and 59 seconds.
Now, I would like to call the first speaker from the opposition side to deliver her speech. The floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate is this House believes that states should not prioritize adaptation over mitigation in response to climate change. We agree with the definition given by the affirmative team. However, we, the negative team, believe that this statement is false. Today, as first speaker, I will be talking to you about mitigation is much better than adaptation, just like the quote saying, preventing is better than cure. Our second speaker will be talking about the high cost that government should need to spend in order to adapt with the climate change. Our third speaker will rebut and sum up our team case. The first speaker of the affirmative team has tried to tell you that climate research infrastructure he also said that improved dryland agriculture. I will be discussing on climate change mitigation. Mitigation means avoiding and reducing activities that affect climate change. My first point is mitigation can prevent death. So states should take care of our water sources like sea and river from being polluted. This is because when river is polluted, it can cause flash flood, like what has happened in Selangor. Okay. The people in Selangor does not have enough time to get ready to face the flash flood. Thus, they were trapped in their house, which was surrounded by flood. During the flash flood, we heard that people encountered death, especially children, because they were fall into the water and drowned. Okay. Now to my second point is mitigation can also prevent bad health in the citizens. Why we should mitigate? Because health and safety of the citizens are the first priority of the government. When the climate is already changed, the citizen already exposed to bad and unhealthy environment, and this cause health issue. For example, when the citizen exposed to polluted air, it affects their respiratory system of the humans. As a result, many citizens, especially children, have asthma. So we need to mitigate, as it technically will prevent the citizens to have a bad health.
Have you done your speech?
Yes.
All right, thank you to the leader of opposition for the speech. The speaker spoke for 4 minutes and 45 seconds.
We should now hear the speech from the Deputy Prime Minister. Here we go. The floor is yours.
Alright, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Firdaus, and hello to all the fellow oppositions, fellow educators, and friends of the floors. Okay. The statement that had been given by the opposition leader that stated that mitigation can prevent death, and she said that as an example is flood in Selangor. Okay, I want to say that in Selangor currently, not quite a long time ago, in Selangor there is a flood happened, a huge flood, a gigantic flood that make people suffer. I want to know why. If you referring to the mitigations, why the government or why the state, even the state levels, don't intercept the problems? Why they don't intercept the flood to be happen earlier, even though every state have their own meteorological center, which were assigned to predict any circumstances, any possibilities that may happen towards the city or the states. Climate change, my point is climate change is a threat to our future, to our planet, to our country, and even on the state levels. As we can see, not quite a long time ago, as I said before, a district of state in Selangor, which is, as an example, Taman Sri Muda or Kramat and so on, as well as other several states that are affected by the huge floods. This case can be seen as why states should prioritize adaptation ahead of mitigations, because the people were unaware towards the circumstances, and because of that, they tragically suffers from the floods. Indeed, every state have their own meteorological center which were assigned to predict any kind of changes or any possibilities. We can assume that the mitigation system is incompetent. So, in fact, of why we need to choose adaptation over mitigation, because you imagine, you are on a ship that sinking because of a leak. If you want to stay afloat, you've got to act. The first thing you could do is grab a bucket and pour the water out. This response is called adaptations, the effects but not the cause of a problem. And then, from my point of view, adaptation can be understood as the process of adjusting to the current and future effects of climate change. The climate change, we can see climate change, we already know that climate change is unpredictable. Even so, states or the government have already making their way out with solutions to intercept the problems, the natural disaster problems. But the natural disaster can be happen in any ways, in every specific ways or any kind of ways, because we can neglect ourselves from the natural disaster, because it is a natural system. So we cannot depending on any machines or any kind of solution. So what we should do is we must spread awareness towards the people. We must make them realize. We must make them know the consequences that may happen or any possibilities that may happen for them to ensure their safety, for them to always in standby for any upcoming circumstances, such as you can make a camp, or you can make a brochure, tell them about how flood can affect it to our, how flood can make people suffer. And then adaptation is how to reduce the negative effect it has and how to take advantage of any opportunities that arise. So what we can understand from that, we must take the earlier steps. We must have a step ahead, because adaptation is simply something that we must accept. We must accept the reality that we faces, which we must be on ready anytime, in every situation, in every time, and in any place. And if you saying that mitigation can be a solution, why the natural disaster still happen in our environment? Okay, that's all from me.
Thank you to the Deputy Prime Minister for the speech. The speaker spoke for 6 minutes and 9 seconds.
Now I would like to call Deputy Leader of Opposition to deliver her speech. The floor is yours.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So I am the opposition leader of the second team, of the opposition team. So the topic for debate today is that the House believes that states should not prioritize adaptation over mitigation in response to climate change. We, the opposition teams, believe that this statement is true, that we should not prioritize adaptation over mitigation. Okay, so the second speaker of the affirmative team has tried to tell you that the second speaker said a word that mentioned something that we must take a step ahead, and also about we should be ready at any time. I think that is the point of our debate today, because that is what it actually means by mitigation. The second speaker actually has actually talked about mitigation, because that is what mitigation is all about. We should prevent before, because by the code of preventing is better than cure. So I believe that the affirmative team has talked about this, that we should take a step ahead, and that is why we should prevent before we could adapt, because we should. That is what we should be doing. We should be preventing before we could cure. Okay, so my first point today is going to be that we should mitigate, because the cost to prepare for the climate change is not even compatible to the aftermath of the cost. What I'm trying to say is that by mitigating, we can actually save the cost that we can actually bear after the climate change occurs. What I mean by climate change is that maybe the flood. So we all know that recently flood occurred at Malaysia, and such an unfortunate event. And what I want to say is that the governments, if we have actually prevented this from occurring, then we would not have to bear the costly aftermath of the flood itself. Because from a report, Malaysia has actually uses over 1.5 billion ringgit to recover from the flood itself. So like Nurul Izzah has actually warned us about the flood before, but the government hasn't actually taken any point on that. That is why it occurs. So I think that we should actually prevent. That is what Nurul Izzah is trying to say. We should prevent so that we don't have to bear the 1.5 billion ringgit loss. Okay, so also as the Sri Muda, which is actually it should have been a water retention area. So if the Sri Muda have actually be the water retention area from the first, if we could have prevented the flood from occurring. Okay, so but the government has made Sri Muda into a resident area, and the water retention area becomes smaller and causing the flood to actually occur worse than it could have actually happened. So my second point is that so we should mitigate because we can prevent by taking examples of other countries and prevent them. So why we should prevent? Because we have actually witnessed other countries experiencing the natural disasters such as flood or an earthquake and something else. So why should we adapt to that when we can actually prevent? Because we have examples from other countries, so we can take them as our examples how they adapt. So in that sense, we can actually prevent the natural disaster or the climate change to occur to our country. Because like I said earlier, we should not we should not bear the cost, because Malaysia is not such a rich country, I can say, because we have actually lost thousands, millions of ringgits due to the COVID-19 itself. Okay, so my third point is that we can actually leave good impressions on other countries by preventing other than adapting. By mitigating, we can actually form a long-term alliance or long-term relationship with other countries. So my example is that we can actually see from the COVID-19 era. So Malaysia did a great job in handling and mitigating the COVID-19 virus itself, the pandemic. So we Malaysian actually had left a good impression during the early early era of the pandemic itself. So the other countries were looking up on to Malaysia as a good country that has actually successfully mitigated the pandemic itself. Although we did, but so how we did not adapt is that the adaptation we can say is that the vaccination. So Malaysia is actually later than other countries about the mitigation. About the vaccination. So we can actually see this where we did a great job in mitigating during the COVID-19 pandemic era. So I think that is why we should mitigate before adapting to the climate change. So I think we the opposition team believes that preventing is better than cure. So I think that's it from us. Thank you.
Thank you to the Deputy Leader of Opposition for the speech. The speaker spoke for 7 minutes.
We shall now hear the speech from the government whip. Here we go. The floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to the respective judges, my fellow government, and also my respective opposition. So today I'm Rohazik, as the government whip, would like to talk about the motion. This House believes that states should prioritize adaptation over mitigation in response to climate change. We as the government side believe and agree that this House believes that states should prioritize adaptation over mitigation in response to climate change. So I will start that actually adaptation, according to the first speaker from the opposition, she said that mitigation can reduce death and prevent bad things to the citizens. But actually adaptation also have the same effect. Adaptation also can reduce death and also prevent bad things happen to the citizen. But at the same time, adaptation can also exploit the opportunities for natural systems. We have the example here, the reforestation. We have in Malaysia, reforestation project Malaysia that helps to conserve the habitat and also the forest, which means in terms of trees or in terms of habitat conservation. Then also the second speaker from the opposition said that the cost is not worth it. For me, adaptation is worth the cost. And also we can see the effectiveness of adaptation in Malaysia, in states of Malaysia. We are talking about the motion states should prioritize adaptation. So adaptation is actually good or great for developing states because adaptation is more suitable than mitigation in response to climate change. We have here in Pantai Morib, Selangor, we have sea walls and revetment that can protect storm surge and waves from the sea. Then we have Pulau Kukuk Johor that start to build ecosystem-based adaptation, which means they use mangroves that have the ability to dampen the storm energy or the waves that came from the sea. Then we have adaptation is also closely linked to social and economic development. As we can see, the second speaker is talking about the cost, but actually adaptation did not take a lot of cost because when we see the adaptation that we have, which means the reforestation, the habitat conservation, it did not take a lot of cost. Then we move to sea walls. It actually did not have a lot of cost also to do sea walls because it is worth it. As we can see, the effectiveness of Pantai Morib to prevent the storm surge had been successful. Then we have green roofs. The government had developed the green roofs that can moderate urban heat islands. Then we move on. Actually, adaptation is also suitable to the society because it is also adjusting to actual or expected future climate. As we can see, the sea level encroachment had been made by the government through the sea walls that help to protect the storm surge. Then we have more intense extreme weather events that actually have been solved by the reforestation that had been made by the government of Malaysia through the habitat conservation, and it proved to be successful. Next, adaptation is also can reduce the risk factors in terms of hazard, the vulnerability and exposure. And actually, cities and municipalities are therefore at the front line of adaptation. This is because nowadays, cities and local communities, which we can see the states around the world, states have been focusing on solving their own climate problems, which we can see working to build flood defenses through Pantai Morib, which is the sea walls, plan for heat wave and higher temperature, to the reforestation, install water permeable pavement to better deal with floods and storm water had been solved by the sea walls and by the reforestation and improve water storage. So actually, I think for me, I like to emphasize that this House believe that states should prioritize adaptation over mitigation in response to climate change, because adaptation had more benefits more than mitigation. And it has been proven to be successful in states of Malaysia. We see in Kedah, the reforestation has started, and the development of through a green cycle, or we see a green states has started. We also see states around the world. We have Selangor, we have Negeri Sembilan, Melaka and Johor that started to develop on to respond to climate change. And before I end, I would like to emphasize some weaknesses from the opposition leader. We start with the first speaker that did not have a clear point about our topic today or the motion today, because I think the mitigation and the adaptation that the first speaker said has the same effect, which means the reduced death, the adaptation also can reduce the death. And for me, we as the government agree that states should prioritize adaptation over mitigation in response to climate change, because adaptation, we have seen the successfulity from this in terms of social, in terms of economy, in terms of structure. We have the structure of seawalls, which is really good. We have see the terms of physical, which we can see the reforestation that started, reforestation project of Malaysia. And I think that's all from me. Thank you. And sorry, before I wrap up my speech, it is 100% agree from us, the government, that this house believes states should prioritize adaptation over mitigation in response to climate change. That's all from me. Thank you.
Right, thank you to the government wife for the speech. The speaker spoke for 7 minutes.
We shall now hear the speech from the opposition whip. Here we go. The floor is yours.
Am I audible?
Yes.
I will start my speech in 1, 2, 3. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So for today's debate, the motion goes, this house believes that states should prioritize adaptation over mitigation in response to climate change. We, from the opposition side, truly disagree with this motion. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we can see both sides, government and opposition, we have one same objective, which is we want we want to have a good response to the climate change, which can benefit us, which can benefit the country itself and the citizen itself. But how both sides are actually conquering the problem, actually, ladies and gentlemen. So here, the government side, they choose to adapting after all the climate change effect already happened, and and we from the opposition side, we choose to learn and we choose to prevent it from happen at the first place. So let's see here. The government side already has stated that adaptation have many benefits. Then also they also list lots of things that show how adaptation has the advantages and how it is proven to help the country and the state itself. So one of their points is they stated that this adaptation can give lots of benefit accordingly to other businesses that want to do or to help or to join in the adaptation journey of the country. So in my opinion, by mitigation, we can also actually gain a lot. Like other businesses or other sector also can have lots and can gain a lot in order to help themselves, and the win-win situation will happen since we also can mitigate the response in climate change that happen in our country. For example, the natural disasters such as flood, landsliding, and etc. So I don't think that is a good point to point out, because when it comes to business and etc. And people can actually make money in a lots of ways. And mitigating a problem is also one of the way that people can use in order to gain their own money. So other than that, they also stated that mitigation is incompetent. They should give me a proof why this is incompetent. There's a lot of other countries that actually already started to mitigate their own natural disaster. For example, uh, Japan, UK, and US, they already have a plan on how to mitigate all the climate change effect and disaster at the first place before anything has happened. So I don't think that this is incompetent at the first place. They also stated that we must have a step ahead. We must be prepared and accept something, because natural disaster is not something that we can control and etc. But for me, natural disaster is something that we can control, ladies and gentlemen. How can natural disaster and how can this climate change happen is because of the human itself. We are the one who make our world is sick, and at the end of the day, we are the one who need to overcome the problem that came across. So by that, I don't think that we are not capable in order to mitigate all the problem that we are the one uh, who came across. For example, I'm sorry. So, for example, in Japan, they know that they want to be a very high and a very high building as one of the thing that they have as a developed country. But they put an alarm system that can help them during all the natural disaster. That's how we mitigate, and that's how we mitigate, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see, natural disasters can happen if even though we have an adaptation. Those are how can you sure that those adaptation is one of the reason that we can bear with the natural disaster and the climate change itself. Uh, as you can see, a lot of advantages that happen by doing adaptation, reforestation, etc. I think that is a mitigation after see a a very uh, a very clear example on how to conquer and to overcome this kind of problem at the first place. So here we can see that we from the opposition side, why we should not prioritize adaptation over mitigation, because we can see the disadvantages of keep adapting to new things is not compatible to how when we mitigate our response to climate change itself, ladies and gentlemen. So before I end my speech, I would like to reaffirm that we, the opposition side, believe the motion. This House believe that states should prioritize adaptation over mitigation in response to climate change should not go through. That's all from me. Thank you.
All right, thank you to the opposition whip for the speech. The speaker spoke for 6 minutes and 7 seconds.
Now, both of the government and opposition are being given 1 minute to prepare their reply speech. The time is up. I call upon the speaker from the opposition side to deliver their reply speech. Here we go. The floor is yours.
Okay, so we from the opposition teams. So I think that the main issue of for today's motion is that the House believes that states should prioritize adaptation over mitigation in response to climate change. And we, the opposition teams, of course, strongly denies this. So I think that the main issue for us to actually stays to mitigate is that about the money that we spend for the adaptation. The third speaker of the government teams actually stated about how reforestation does not cost a lot and how everything is worth it. But if we actually look out, and the reforestation actually cost about 33 billion US dollars. So I think that Malaysia does not actually have the that much of money to spend on reforestation itself, because like I said earlier, why should we adapt when we can actually prevent the thing from occurring itself? So like we said earlier, from our first speaker, we talked about how the health actually has actually been affected by adapting. So I think this is true because while we are adapting to something, to climate change, many lives has been sacrificed, and the damage has been done towards the people, towards the citizens. So I believe that should not happen. So in the first place, we should actually prevent this from happening, because life is not something that we can play around with. So the next one, what happens if we actually try to adapt rather than mitigating towards the climate change? I think that Malaysia can actually suffer from loss of money, and actually and also the health of its citizens. Like I said earlier, we would lose a lot of money by actually trying to adapt to that, and the health of the citizens would actually worsen while we are trying to adapt to that. So also the opponents team actually have strong point about the health, and also about the money that we spend. And the government team only talked about how it is worth it, and they also talked about how we should take a step ahead, and how the mitigation system is incompetent. But I think we have actually proven that the mitigation system is actually competent and more reliable than the adaptation system. And also the government team also talked about how the seawalls are being done, but we actually believe that the seawalls is actually an act of mitigation, because why do we do the seawalls is actually to prevent the damage from happening. So I believe that the government is actually also supporting that mitigation is much more important than adaptation. So last but not least, we, the opposition team, believe that preventing is better than cure, like everybody knows. And that's it from us. Thank you.
Now to conclude, let's welcome the speaker from the government side to give their reply speech. The floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you to speakers, all the members of the government as well as the opposition. I will to stand up on behalf of the government that we strongly support that states should prioritize adaptation over mitigation in response to climate change. This is because that such we say that the adaptation to climate changes can prevent, can prevent or minimize the damage they can cause or take advantage of opportunities they may arise, which mean that prevention is better than cure. We should accept the reality that the world is really in the climate changes, so we really need to adapt ourselves in this situation. Such examples, early warning system could prevent more damage and also can prevent more casualties. Like just what happened in previous events, previous flood in Malaysia earlier, where if we had the earlier warning system, we could prevent more damage, we could prevent more casualties that if we had the early warning system, we should be ready at any time. Okay. Other point that I would like to point out again that the cost to adapt to climate change is not really costly. Just like what the government said that it's not really cost the money to build like the reforestation and seawalls. I would like to remind that the adaptation can reduce hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. I also like to argue, that not all citizens will follow the mitigation in response to climate changes. We already see in Malaysia, not all of our people use to the renewable energy such as solar energy. This is because it's all come down to cost and infrastructure. Add that the government imposed the taxes on such energy. Ultimately, the biggest hindrance to the development of renewable energy, it is cost and logistical barriers. Without adaptation, the people cannot react immediately. We should react first before it happens. I would like to point out that the climate changes is unpredictable. Such example, just like yesterday, we have earthquake in Indonesia, and some people in Malaysia, such as Kuala Lumpur, Selangor, and Melaka, feel that the impact of the earthquake. So this is why we should prioritize the adoption of the medication in response to climate changes. I would like to point out again that we should prevent we should prevent we should prevent we should be more cautious. We should be react immediately before it happens. This is why we need to prioritize adaptation. That's all my speech. Thank you.
Thank you to the government side. That is all for this round debate session. On behalf of the House, I thank the adjudicators for their assistance. I congratulate all the debaters on their performance.
Alright, now the host will assign all the educators to the breakout room to discuss. While the debaters please remain in this room in the meantime. Thank you.
Sekarang Hakim tengah berbincang tentang pemakaian untuk anda semua. So siapa-siapa yang ada nak pergi tandas ke, ada yang lapar ke, ada yang ni ke, boleh pergi mana-mana. Boleh lah. Boleh tak untuk tunggu seketika lah.
Yudin ada ke?
UIDP ada ke kat situ?
Ya.
Dah tengok chat box?
Oh,
Thank you.
okay. Sebentar ya.